In this video, we'll be talking about the cardiovascular system of human beings. Before we start, let us try to understand what are the various functions of this circulatory system or the cardiovascular system. This system is an important medium through which the nutrients and the waste products are transported through the different parts of the body. Also, it is a medium through which the exchange of gases such as oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place. It is also a carrier of metabolic intermediates. It carries several kinds of ions and other necessary products which are required by the body to function normally. Hormones and all are also transported through these body fluids, that is with the help of the circulatory system. And there is uniform distribution of the water, hydrogen ion, chemical substances, and it also is responsible for maintaining the body's temperature, keeping it stable. So the human circulatory system is a very important system, and it is actually made up of few important components. When we talk of the components, there are certain important components such as heart, the arterial venous system, both the systems are equally important, and the lymphatic system, because lymph eventually it enters into the veins, by which again it is it re-enters into the main circulatory path. Now we'll study one by one the structure of and functioning of each of the components of the circulatory system. Human circulatory system is blood vascular system, and as I told, it has the components which are essential for proper functioning of this particular system. The lymph and the blood are the body fluids which are circulated throughout this. Let us first start with a very important organ or very important component of the human circulatory system, that is heart. Now when we talk of heart is mesodermal in origin. That is, when we are talking of the three layers, it is mesodermal in origin and is situated in the thoracic cavity in between the two lungs. The space between the two lungs is known as mediastinum. So the space which is occupied by the heart is mediastinum. The heart is located over there, and as a result the left lung is always slightly smaller than the right lung because the space is occupied by the heart. It is slightly towards the left hand side. Now if we see to the size of the heart, it is the size of a clenched fist. That means it is the size of a clenched fist. If approximate, this is the side, and if we talk in terms, it is approximately adult heart is 12 centimeter in length and 9 centimeter in width, and it weighs approximately 300 grams. Now this is about the position and the structure of the heart. Coming to the detailed structure, we find that the heart is protected by a double-walled membranous membrane that is known as pericardium. So this outer is the pericardium. Pericardium is the outermost wall or outermost covering of the heart. Now this pericardium has two different layers. That means the pericardium consists of two different layers. That is, the outer layer is the fibrous layer. Outer layer is the fibrous layer, and the inner is serous layer. This outer layer, fibrous layer, is quite thick and tough, whereas the inner layer is thin and transparent. Now the space between these two layers is occupied by pericardial fluid. The space between we are talking of the outermost layer, so the pericardial fluid. This pericardial fluid is present between the outer fibrous layer and serous layer, in between these two layers. In the space is pericardial space and the fluid is pericardial fluid. The pericardial fluid is important because it protects the heart and it keeps the tissue, or it provides the tissues with the nutrients. It is a shock absorber as well. Now, after this pericardial fluid, let us come to the inside structure of the heart. When we talk of the heart, it is four-chambered. In the case of human beings, it is four-chambered heart and is divided into two atrium, that is, this is the upper atrium, that is left atrium, and the right atrium. So over here we have the right atrium, and here it is the left atrium. This is the left atrium over here, and then we have the ventricles. So this is the right ventricle, the left atrium we have already marked, and this is the left ventricle. So we have right and left ventricle, right and left atrium or auricles. Now, the upper chambers are auricles or atrium, and the lower ones are known as the ventricles. Now there is a thin muscular wall which divides the right and the left atria, and there is a thick wall that divides the ventricle. So over here, this is the atrium region, and the wall that divides these two is thin, and the ventricle, these are the ventricles, the wall dividing between these two is quite thick. So we call this as, the upper one is interatrial septum, that is the wall, thin wall which is dividing the two atria. This wall is interatrial septum, and this area, that is the thick wall which is dividing the two ventricles, will be intraventricular septum. So this is interventricular septum, which is quite thick. Now, the atrium and the ventricles are of the same side, are also separated by fibrous tissue called as atrioventricular septum, because these two are also required to be separated. That is, the auricle and the ventricle need to be separated. Auricle and ventricle need to be separated. So they are separated by atrioventricular septum. Now, these septa, that is the atrioventricular septa, has openings with the help of valves. So there is valve formation over here. You can see the valve. These are the valves over here. So the valve over here is the bicuspid valve or the mitral valve. One and the same thing. Mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. It opens towards the ventricle. Then we have between the right atrium and the right ventricle, we have the tricuspid valve. So over here we have the tricuspid valve between the right atrium and the left atrium, right atrium and the right auricle, and bicuspid towards the left and the left auricle and the left ventricle. Now these valves are very important because they allow the flow of blood in one direction only and do not allow the blood to go back That means they prevent the backflow of the blood. Now, these valves actually as I told, these prevent any backward flow. Now, coming to when we are studying the structure, we also find that there are certain system for conduction of the heart, because heart is completely made up of muscles, and there has to be a mechanism which should actually cause the contraction and the relaxation so as to allow the pumping of the blood. So for that pumping of the blood, there has to be conduction system. Before we start with the study of the conduction system, we have to study the structure, that is what is the cardiac, actually the heart is made up of. The heart is basically made up of three type of muscle layers. The outer one is known as the epicardium, the middle is known as the myocardium, and the inner one is known as endocardium. Now the myocardium is the layer which is the middle one, and it is a thick layer of cardiac muscles. Now these muscles, cardiac muscles, are striated, branched, and are involuntary. Now how does this is of benefit? This is, they are branched, so once the contraction starts, it will be passed to the entire heart. Secondary, they are involuntary, that means they are not under the control of our will, and they are straightened. So we find that myocardium forms the cardiac muscles. Now coming to the physical structure of the heart, we find that the wall, that is the outer, this is what is made up of the myocardium and epicardium and all. So we find the walls of the ventricle are much thicker as that of the auricle. The reason is the heart has to pump the blood from the ventricles to different parts of the body. So the muscles or the muscular muscles which are forming the ventricles are thicker and much stronger, and also they beat with much strength so as to pump blood through the aorta to different parts of the body. Now, when we talk of the structure, another important structure is the sinoatrial node. This is known as SAN node also. SAN node. This node is actually the pacemaker of the heart. It is responsible for creating the impulse, or it sends the signal for the heart to beat. Now, this is present in the right upper corner of the right atrium. So over here you can see the SN node is present towards the right hand side of the right atrium. This is the right atrium and it is present over here. Another node which is known as AV node or the atrioventricular node is present at the atrioventricular septum. Now this is also very, very important. This is forming the part of the conduction system. Now a bundle of nodal fibers and the AVN bundle, which we call, passes through the atrioventricular septum and reaches at the end. So over here you can see, from here the bundle passes through the atrioventricular septum and then divides and reaches to the two sides of the ventricles. Now these are known as bundle of His. The bundle of His actually was discovered by Wilhelm His in 1893, and it is also an important, this we are talking of the conducting, the part of the conduction system. So SA node generates the impulse, it is passed on the atrioventricular node and then to the bundle of His, the complete. and this bundle of his has several Purkinje fibers. So we find Purkinje fibers over here. Purkinje fibers are present over here. These are the Purkinje fibers. Now, Purkinje fibers were discovered by J.E. Purkinje, and these are actually specialized conducting fibers which are made up of excitable cells, and the impulse is electrical impulse, and they can conduct cardiac action potential more quickly and more efficiently than other cells of the heart. They play an important role in electrical conduction and propagation of impulse to the ventricular muscles. So if in a nutshell, if we try and understand what is happening over here is the sinoatrial node will generate the impulse which will pass on to the AV node, and through this fibers the entire impulse will be passed to the ventricles in a very short span of time, and as a result these muscles will contract, pushing the blood out of the aorta. So this entire conduction system is composed of SAN, AVN and the bundle of His and the Purkinje fibers. We'll be studying about how they function in the cardiac cycle. Here we are trying to understand the structure of the heart. Now over here you can see the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, which are responsible for bringing the blood from the upper and the lower part of the body. This is the deoxygenated blood which is being brought about by the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, whereas the pure blood is released or is sent to different parts of the body through the aorta. Now, when we are talking of the this SAN, the SAN generates the action potential on its own. It has the ability to generate the action potential without any external stimuli, and it can generate the action potential of about 70 to 75 per minute. That's why the heartbeat is approximate normal heartbeat. We consider 72 as the normal heartbeat or the heartbeat of a healthy person. And this is responsible for maintaining, that is starting and maintaining the rhythmic contraction of the heart. So the SAN has an action potential of around 70 to 75 per minute. 70 to 75 per minute, and as a result this is the action potential we are talking of, and this action potential is self-generating. That means it do not require any external stimulus. It starts on its own. Once it starts, it never stops also. So the sinoatrial node is therefore known as the pacemaker of the heart, and it passes the stimulus to the AVN. The AVN carries it through the bundle of His and Purkinje fibers, which spread throughout the lower portion of the heart, that is the ventricles. And 72 beats per minute is the normal heartbeat of a person who is healthy and is not suffering from any kind of ailment. Study the structure of the heart